Today, I want to talk about something that has been debated for pretty much all of human existence, and that is the concept of free will. Do we have free will? No. Short answer, no. But that's primarily because the word free is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting. Do we make choices? Yes, obviously. So, given a whole bunch of inputs and conflicting desires, we certainly appear to make choices. But we it's also doing a lot of heavy lifting. The human brain has a ton of different systems and subsystems. Different systems have different desires, incentives. Our bodies themselves aren't entirely us. I mean, at least 50% of the cells that are within the space that we would say is our body are not our cells. Some estimates make it, actually 10x the number of cells that we have that are ours versus not ours, just because of gut bacteria, viruses, funguses, etc. So, and gut bacteria is a very interesting set of things to poke at because your gut bacteria is responsible for quite a lot of your neurotransmitter production. And those neurotransmitters, the neurochemical cocktails floating around your brain, have an enormous effect on your personality, your mood, your desires, a whole bunch of other things. In fact, I've actually heard interesting stories from multiple sources that heavy rounds of antibiotics, because of the effect on gut bacteria, have been known to change people's personalities dramatically. So that's quite interesting. And then, God, I forget the guy's name, but there's a famous neuroscientific case about a dude who started exhibiting really extreme and terrible behavior, and was got himself into trouble. But when he was examined, they did a scan of his brain. They found that there was a growth or a tumor that was pressing on a certain part of his brain. I forget the details, but effectively, like once they were able to remove or reduce the tumor, behavior went down to normal, like went back to his previous baseline. So this idea that we have free will, that we are magically making unencumbered choices, that's bullshit. Does that mean that determinism is accurate? Maybe. We don't actually know enough about the nature of the universe to say if that's true or not. Now, if the universe is a closed system and there's a consistent set of rules that it follows from the beginning until now with no variation, well, then yes, technically determinism would have to be true because in a closed system with a fixed set of rules, things are going to play out a certain way based on starting conditions. So if there was a set of starting conditions and a set of rules in a closed space, like that's it. Everything is, in fact, deterministic. Even if the complexity of the system is too great for us to unravel, there's a system, there's a structure in that case. But we don't know if that's the case. We don't know if the universe is a closed system. We don't know if there are other universes. We don't know if there are other dimensions. We don't understand gravity fully or quantum physics or a whole bunch of other things. So we don't know enough to say with certainty that the universe is configured in a way where determinism is accurate. However, if you make those assumptions, the universe is a limited closed system and there are a fixed set of rules, then yes, then you do determinism is accurate. Anyway, unknown. So from that perspective, it's not that the opposite of free will is determinism, kind of, but I think there's a lot of potential variations in between. So let's go back to free will. Who exactly is doing the choosing? You? What does you mean? Are you talking about conscious you? Because, well, that doesn't seem to be accurate. There's been neuroscientific studies that measure exactly when, examining the brain with fMRI, exactly when does your brain make a decision to do something or not do something. And it's well in advance of conscious you being aware of the decision. There's also been research into split brain patients where speaking directly to one half of the brain post hemispherectomy and telling it to do something, and then asking the other half independently why it did something, and it makes up a reason. So, like, which you is making these decisions? They're certainly not unencumbered. I mean, this idea that your decisions are free makes no sense at all. You didn't choose your genetics. You didn't choose your parents or the environment in which you grew up in. You didn't choose a lot of the memes and concepts that were placed into your mind. You didn't choose the society you grew up in. You didn't choose whatever religion, if any, you were brought up in. So you didn't choose the laws probably of the civilization in which you exist. Like there are so many things that you had no choice about, all of which stack up and create enormous pressure towards certain decisions and certain paths, and you don't control those things, and you don't control a lot of the downstream things either. Your diet can affect your decision making capability, your sleep, medication that you take. Like there are so many things. So this idea that your will can somehow be free, and I interpret free as unencumbered, because that's really what it's supposed to mean, and that's the way in which most people use it, which is that I me made this choice free and clear. It was mine. Nobody made me do it. And that's just bullshit. So it's interesting to think about. It's also interesting to keep in mind that our social structure doesn't work without the concept. Without the ability to assign blame and hold people responsible for their actions, then you don't really have a working societal structure. So even if it's not true, we still have to kind of pretend that it is, at least to some degree, so that we can have this system of rules and consequences, without which things just wouldn't work. So that's a whole nother can of worms. But I think it is fair to say that free will, as most people think about it, doesn't exist. It can't exist because there are simply too many antecedents, too many encumbrances. Does that mean we don't make choices? No, as I already said, obviously, like we make all kinds of choices, but we, again, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. Is it your gut bacteria craving a specific input that is fiddling with your neurochemical cocktail? Like, is that the we that we're talking about? Is it conscious you acting on a desire? Well, what's the root of that desire? I mean, are you sure that conscious you picked it, or did that desire just appear and conscious you justified it? Because that's a whole other thing. This process of like the thinker thinks and the prover proves, where we justify post hoc all kinds of things, make up whatever story fits the narrative that we want, uh, whatever it takes to make us feel like a good person, whatever it takes to make us feel happy or satisfied. So I could probably spend hours and hours and hours talking about all of the specific little things in this area, but I don't have to. I have written a blog post about it. A dude I used to follow on Twitter wrote like a huge compounded like thread of threads with tons of interesting info and blog posts. I mean, Sam Harris has tackled this ad nauseum. Free will is bullshit, but we have to pretend that it's something so that civilization works. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be aware of the fact and make some allowances for it. Maybe don't be so harsh on yourself. Recognize that you don't actually have full control over all the things you think you do. And this actually brings up another thing worth discussing, which is a lot of people feel like acknowledging that free will isn't real is disempowering. That this belief that you're not actually in control of your life and how things go is disempowering. I'm not entirely sure that's the case, because even if it's not absolutely true, like your brain and body are going to act as if it is anyway. You're still going to do stuff. You're still going to have preferences. You're still going to take action. So is it really disempowering? Not really. I mean, it's useful to know so that you can not be so harsh on yourself, but also useful to recognize that, like, hey, in some ways, you're just kind of along for a ride. That said, even though you don't have control over all of the things that have built up and drive you in various directions, you can gain some additional control by poking at and examining those things. So, simply going through, there's a book called Spiritual Enlightenment: The Damnedest Thing by Jed McKenna. And while I don't agree with the underlying premise that we are all facets of some universal consciousness, not that it's impossible, I just don't think that's terribly likely, it's an interesting line of thought to poke at. And one of the things that he covers in that book is a process he calls spiritual autolysis, which he indicates is the process of becoming enlightened. And it's a subtractive process. It happens by carefully examining all of the things that we believe or assume to be true, and by really bringing them into the light and looking at them closely, dissolving them. I think you can do this with a lot of the things drive you. You can carefully examine things from your past. You can carefully examine certain emotions or compulsions or preferences and systematically neutralize some of them. So, to some degree, just by exploring the things that nudge you in one direction or another, you can reduce the amount of power those have over your path through life. But doing so, I can't say for sure that doing so makes you more free, because there's still going to be pieces there that are nudging you one way or another. But they at least, perhaps it makes you a little more free. I don't know, worth poking at. But there you have it. Free will, bullshit. Determinism, unknown. Do we make choices? Of course, obviously. Should everybody be held responsible for their actions? I mean, yeah, if you want civilization to work, but if you don't like that, you can always go be a hermit somewhere, live off grid, away from everybody, whatever. You could just surrender and go with the flow and take whatever life kicks your way. You could go down the path of enlightenment and strip everything away until you have no sense of self. Hey, whatever floats your boat. But yeah, free will's bullshit. Peace.